So today we are doing a deep dive into Final Fantasy XIV's Dawntrail, the most recent expansion. And today I'm here with Matt
Hello.
and Eddie
Hi.
and a little Makote named Andrea.
Hi, this is exactly what I look like in real life, by the way. This is
A
it.
little mamulcha drawing in the sand.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the Mimolta. We have the same posture, so
Oh
This
no,
shrimping extraordinaire.
from the tail.
So why don't we get started by doing a little bit of introductions? I say we introduce ourselves, what we do, and the job we have in Final Fantasy, and maybe why we do that job. So I'm Kate, obviously editor-in-chief of But Why Though, and the lovely host of this here podcast. And I am a paladin in Final Fantasy 14, and that's primarily because I like something that makes me think a little bit, and I don't know how to get out of the red, so I need something with high sustainability, and thus I tank. Matt,
Why am I going second? I don't like going second.
because you're second in the little squares.
No, that's not how this works.
Okay, we'll reverse it. Andrea.
okay. I am Andrea Sharon. I am associate editor over at Destructoid.com. I've also done some freelance work for a long time around, so you may have seen me at like Fanbyte Link Shell back when that was a thing, and IGN, some other places like that. I play mostly Scholar. I've played a little bit of all the healers though, except for Sage. I don't know how to play that. And otherwise, I'm also DPS, physical ranged, machinist. But I like playing Scholar just because I do like feeling like I can save the day when everything kind of goes to hell in a handbasket. But otherwise, I think that's really my only reason. I like to excog myself because I am like Kate. If I eat shit, then I want to be saved. So.
Eddie, what about you?
I'm Eddie. I'm a writer about games. I write for But Why Though, and I write guides for IGN. And I play as a paladin because I like the whole noble protector kind of thing is fun. I like in raids being able to throw up Divine Veil, and that like shields and heals everybody a little bit. And obviously it's not like a heal, but I think it helps a little. So I enjoy that. And and Pictomancer. I picked a Pictomancer with the release of Dawntrail because it's just cool as hell from the moment that I first saw it, and it really clicks with me. So I'm glad, and hopefully I can do big damage with it in like raids and stuff. Yeah.
I just like that Eddie's like has a selfless reason to be a paladin, and I have a selfish reason to be a pally.
I am noble.
That was so wholesome.
I
Eddie. That was
know.
like, you were like Endwalker coming through.
Okay, Passage of Arms is the best ability in the game, bar none.
You have good glam too, is that class? So there you go.
Do
Thank
we?
you. Yeah, on my
Oh my
coconut
god,
dog.
I forgot Kate doesn't like it. I love the shields. I love the shields, man.
Matt. What about
Obviously,
you?
I'm Matt. I'm the other half of But Why Though for the main part. I do some writing over there and podcasting and literally pretty much everything there is over at butwhythough.net. And then obviously within this channel when we're on there. And then I play Bard because a long time ago I thought I was going to get to play my little harp when I played Bard. And then I learned you don't. And then I just like, you know what? I do like bows, so I guess I will just stay there. And I'm ranged. I like playing ranged DPS for the most part, so I can just run around back there and just sit there and not have to worry about things sometimes and do whatever while you all are chaotically having to do things.
Yeah,
From a distance.
Yes.
that's smart. Because I am like the worst combo of a melee DPS and a tank. So that means that when I melee DPS as a Sam, I completely forget that I'm not a tank. So that's fun for my heroes, my healers. One of which is in chat. Thank you so much, Rika. But yeah, so let's get started on talking about Dawntrail. It is the most recent expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, and with it we got an entirely new area. We went west, we went to the New Worlds, we went to Thrall, and we had 6 new zones. So we're gonna dive into...
Hold on, we didn't go west. The bunnies, the British bunnies,
That's right.
apparently had exploration and realized, oh my gosh, the world is not flat. it still goes on.
That's fair.
And magically, through the clouds, we found another continent.
That's fair. That's fair.
We knew it. We knew it was there.
Thank you, British bunnies. So just to kind of kick us off, one of the things that was really exciting about Dural for me very specifically was looking at how influenced it was by Latin American culture. And when we went to the preview, that we got to see Urqupacha and Tlilol and Kazumauka, I believe. So those first 3 zones that we're in. And I was really excited, but I didn't get to go in deep to the story pieces of it. I didn't get to see all the small little things that they added. And now that we're playing Dawntrail, it's pretty clear that like they took inspiration and really made it full, whether we're talking about the architecture, the culture, the colors, or more specifically, some of the recipes that are involved and you find in those zones. Eddie, I know you had a pretty personal story about Pibil being in Dawntrail, so I'm going to kick it over to you.
So, light spoilers, there is focus on a recipe called Sibruk Pibil in the game. And I was kind of just like going through the MSQ at first, and then I started to pay attention to what they were saying. I'm like, oh, wait, I know that word. Because my family actually makes cochinita pibil every so often, and it's like one of my favorite like homemade meals. So it was really like, we knew that this was going to be like, oh, it's like Mesoamerica, Central, South America. But like seeing something that like I very specifically identified with, like just kind of like opened it all up to me more so. Especially that's not the only recipe either. If I don't know if y'all had anything to say on this one, but
no, I mean, I think you can keep talking. I mean, I don't see as many recipes so much as like Matt's like, Kate, there's carne asada in here, and I'm like, ooh,
So,
Right,
is
yeah.
there?
I mean, if we want to have a thing, like I enjoyed, we get the legumes and mesquites, which are just basically
Yes.
the little
We get
pods.
elote.
Yeah, so like obviously
Yeah.
they took the gathering and as much as they have the recipes, they do have the gathering where you're gathering like type of pineapples or like I said mesquite beans or acacia bark or acacia trees and everything else. So they do took a lot of the like I guess the vegetation that you do find and obviously put their usual Final Fantasy spin on it, which was nice to see with the photos. The best part is we do get some mixture of some new icon photos because it is funny. We are getting to the point where some of these have very overlapping. Like, oh no, I have 4 things that look the same, and what are they? What are they? But as far as the name wise and how they are utilized, it's been nice to see like how they do fit together with the cultural aspects of everything and just the regional aspects of everything.
Yeah.
Because obviously anybody who knows me, I have a vegetational background in botany of the mountains of Texas and the western part. So like seeing
that
all those
rules.
trees. What?
Yeah, he's a whole botanist.
That ruled.
I thought you were just saying you like leveling botanist in the game.
Me too.
Wow. Yeah. Glad
That's
I
awesome.
spent all that great college money on my great
You
degrees.
could tell us about the plants in the game.
I should hire you. Okay.
But no, the other recipe that I found is, well, in the game it's stuffed peppers, and I think it's for gathering, which is something I'm focusing on right now. But like, it took me a while. When I was making it, it clicked because of the ingredients that you use. That it's just chiles rellenos,
Yeah.
which is something that my uncle like used to make all the time. Again, like it's nice to like see something that I so strongly connect with, and like it just brings me further into that world.
I
I
like.
think-
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, Eddie, like on that note, I think, and God, Kate, we've had this conversation so many times, just with like some of that old South, like cultural overlap here too, with like even the Southeast, because I'm from Mississippi for context. I'm not from Texas, even though I'm here now. There are a lot of things that I look at this and I'm like, wow, like I ate this growing up, and I know where like my mama got a lot of these dishes and stuff like that. Like I know who all taught her to cook and all that good stuff, but like seeing stuff like wild banana blend, I thought that was banana pudding at first. I don't think it's supposed
Yeah.
to be, but I was
It's
convinced
banana
it
pudding in
was.
my heart. That's what I'm going.
Yeah, it was, and I was like, "Oh my god, do you think that they
Hey,
know about
everybody
my
uses
mama's banana
plátanos. It's good.
Oh my- I was Like I was just so excited. And Matt, I think it was one we talked about. It was an old one, but we just started talking
Cornbread.
about.
Apparently,
Yes.
Andrea did not
Cornbread.
know that cornbread was been in the game for quite a few years now. It's
I
apparently
think
level 30 recipe.
I think it's a Realm Reborn. Is it?
Yes,
It's in the
yeah,
Realm.
it's Realm Reborn, level 30 recipe. She's like,
I
we're
don't-
getting cornbread, and I'm like, cornbread's already here though.
Yeah. They should have done it again. It's like a level 90 or something.
No, they should
recipe.
have done jalapeno cornbread. That's what they should have done.
Oh my. That's what I eat.
Oh man, yeah.
Yoshida, please take that
yes.
idea. Run with it. Let's go.
Yes.
Which I will say too, like I think what we're all kind of getting at, and you know, they're the Tyrol list pages that they put up for the game to coincide with the marketing also did have recipes for tacos al pastor. They called it a Tuliyalal sunrise, which was just a tequila sunrise, which I still
Yeah.
need to make because I have the
Very cute.
ingredients. But it was this moment for me, kind of very similar to Eddie, where you're realizing that they didn't just use Latin American culture, Latino culture as set dressing or window dressing for it. No, like they baked it into the game. They baked it into the crafting, into the gathering. They put it into all the designs of all the locations that we go to. And I think for me, I'm very used to people loving the way that like Latin American culture looks, but not necessarily understanding the layers to it or all the pieces to it. And I kind of wanted to ask everybody as well, like, what are your favorite zones? And maybe like a little bit of those zones, because I think that like all of these are so layered.
So before we get to the zones, can we talk about them grabbing Darby and saying you?
Oh yeah,
Gonna
no,
go-
Darby's
Oh my
great.
God,
Darby's
dude.
Like
perfect.
the promotional material, which probably is like bad of just like how much it's good of like just promotional, but they're like, yeah, because I mean we've all been sold on like this is a vacation now. We
Yeah.
already did all the stuff in Walker, and they said, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna get a tour guide, and he's gonna play the dumbest, adorable tour guide out there to make random skit videos with fun stuff. And I was like, wow. I just need you to take this. Can we put this in the game and I'll just follow you around and listen to you talk to me all day?
I'm not gonna lie, that's
Y'all-
one follow quest I'd actually want to
yeah.
do.
I'm gonna show my bimbo hours. I didn't know who that was. Apparently, everybody knew who that was.
He's so
no.
good.
I was like, "Who is this?" Everybody is so
no.
excited.
Reese Darby, yeah.
Oh man.
Just
Everyone's
Google
disappointed.
him, Flight of the Concord, like compilation. You'll see him like being funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Y'all always have to assume I don't know who the celebrity is or who the actor is.
That
Just
is
assume.
perfect.
Look, he was just vibing. It didn't matter. They said, "Hey,
He
throw
was
this on."
good, though.
Yes.
Yeah, he's great.
He was great.
But going from that though, what place do you want to go to, like IRL? Did you appreciate the most? Like, I'm not gonna start with me. We can start with Matt, Eddie, Andrea. We may be vibing on what our favorite is, so I'll save us for the end.
I'm gonna see. Here's the problem. I can't pronounce the names as well as you. Which one is Pandora Land?
Yaktel?
Yeah, that's Yakdal.
There we go. That's where I'm at. That's the one we got. Yaktel. Did I do it right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think so,
That's
yeah.
There we go. Perfect. I'm calling it Pandora Land so we understand it. I think I just like the music the most in that one, and just the contrast between the upper and lower vegetation of just you have the canopy, and then
Yeah.
you kind of go in the understory with the tall trees and everything else, and then the lighting and the way it all sets up. But I think that one will probably be my favorite zone. Weirdly, I don't even know how much I'm in there. I guess it's been gathering so much stuff that's actually kind of a decent one to do.
Yeah.
But that one I think would be probably up there with my favorite, just because I think that one has by far the best music, which I know we kind of haven't touched on, as far as like the new inspiration things. But the music is actually really good, which is not supposed to be surprising. But after 10 plus years, they're still making great, fitting music. Is great, I guess.
I will say that one has some of my favorite. The idea that I can fall into a cenote at any time is just really cool. Or no, though that's the next. No, that is part of Yakdal, right? That's just like the up part.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the one above the land. Yeah, the cenote usage is really, really interesting, especially because they kind of give it the same reverence that like indigenous cultures gave cenotes. They were passages to the afterlife and the underworld, and they were viewed with reverence. So that's really cool.
This is all stuff that I learned just from like hearing you talk and like my introduction through this game, by the way, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Like I looked it up and I was like, oh, is it like a sinkhole? Like, but no, this is like what I learned. I think it's cool as hell.
Well, and I think that that's awesome. Like, I think that is for me, I think like that's what you want out of
Yeah.
a culture being represented. Like you don't want somebody to just show up and like look at it. You want somebody to like show up and be interested to like find out more. Like if somebody like just Googles like tacos al pastor because they didn't know what those were, but they saw it, it's like, oh, these are real, and they learn it, or a cenote, and everything like that. I think that's just I don't know. It's really heartwarming, man. It's cool.
I think that's the difference
Yeah.
when something feels like it's costumey versus
Yeah.
like we care about this thing that we put in here. I guess
Exactly.
it's a whole other point, but still.
Yeah.
So my zones, because so I really like the first half of Tural like a lot. Mostly because of the music. I think I mentioned it to you, Kate, that like some of the songs in the villages remind me of like Zelda music, where it's like just a
Yeah.
mandolin playing like very like lackadaisically, um, or like just seeing an alpaca running around in Orcapacha.
Yeah.
But so it's funny, like you mentioned the cenotes. I flew into one. Um, and it
Well,
actually you can go into the water
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you can come out at another cenote, which I was shocked by. But no, I love that whole lower half of Yaktel with like the trees, obviously like the blue lighting and
Yeah.
stuff. It's very
The
cool.
luminescence and everything.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like that city Mamuk, like
Oh,
Mhm.
Mamuk is
it just
beautiful.
looks like something you would see like in Chichen Itza or something.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I loved Shaloni and like the music in that area. Like I didn't expect the guitar. Um, but yeah, it's real good. It's all good.
So we had a discussion before we started this podcast. We were going to try to keep rants to a minimum. However, Shaloni though,
Let's
yeehaw
go.
land. I would like to address it for everybody who thought it was filler. It was not. It's actually really important when you look at the inspirations that they're getting for the areas. So one of the things that I think is really important about Yeehaw Land is that it embodies the American Southwest. You have elements of the Texas border town, you have elements of the Pueblas in Arizona, New Mexico, and you have native communities that are along like the Gulf area as well, which I think is pretty reminiscent of like Louisiana and that
Yes.
area.
Yes.
And like that's what's exciting because when you're showcasing kind of like this large history, because in each of these zones, it's not just Latin America monolith. You have Incan culture, architecture, you have Mayan, you have Aztec, and all of those are very different from each other, as well as very different in the biomes that they are in Central and Latin America. And then you have the American Southwest, which is tied very closely to those areas because the first cowboys were vaqueros. They were Mexican. They taught everybody who came and settled how to rope horses and how to take care of cattle. That was something we did along with indigenous folks. And that is something that I think is really powerful to see represented because as much as it's funny that they just took the swing and were like, yo, we're making cowboys now, it actually really pays off when you know the history of the area. And I think that like I made a cowboy glam and I was only riding my chocobo the entire time with its barding and through that entire area. And I still switched my cowboy glam every time I go to Shaloni. I'm gonna pass it to Andrea right now because I love that zone very much because it feels like home in
Yeah.
like a very special way. Like everything else feels like me connecting to seeing like larger parts of my culture represented that I don't really get to see but have really beautiful mythologies and robust things to offer fantasy. But this one felt like home. So
Yeah. No, no, 100% on this feels like home. Because that part too, even with some of the ridiculous accents, they had people in there that wasn't really just, oh my God, Final Fantasy's telling me that I'm about to disconnect. No. People in there that didn't just have like the Texas twang, the
yeah.
like American Southwest twang. There were some people out there that had like the drawl, and
Yeah.
there's like Southeastern people. You can hear it in me. The way I say Shaloni sometimes comes out and it's like what the hell. I also call it Charlian and everybody is okay. I've got like that drawl, but there are people that sound like that, and it sounds cartoonish to some, but yes, that's how a lot of us
It's
sound.
yes.
And you go up to that that
Yes, the
northeastern part that
northeastern
you're talking
part.
about. Yes, and that is the part that reminded me of the southeastern part because while
Mm-hmm.
I am very familiar with Texas, being from Mississippi, we have like that pine, that southern pine, more like atmosphere. A lot of like the Mississippi Delta, all of
Mm-hmm.
the wetlands around there and through Louisiana. That part right there, and yes, even the big old gators. I
Which,
was
by
like,
the way, I'm gonna
oh my
interrupt
God.
you just for a second. The fact
Yeah.
that there's a fate where the gators just jump out of the water is still the best thing.
It's so
Yes.
cool.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, I love it. All of that. I was just like, all right, this is very specifically the part that I feel like I'm familiar with because
Yeah.
while the rest of it I may only know from visiting, this part right here I feel like is more like home.
Yeah.
And then we just have these very tiny little settlements on the map of people that are just kind of rugging it and living out there.
Yeah.
And we kind of go through, talk to those people a couple of times. Those moments were really special. And I have another reason why Shaloni is my favorite map that I'm going to save for later when we get into spoilers. Um, but I do think if we paid attention through some parts of Endwalker that are extremely important, this map makes a lot of sense.
And I,
So I'll
So,
save that.
Yes.
so I do want to say that the interesting part. We talk about all the, you see all the people, everything else, and I don't know. I haven't quite. I go back and forth on whether to give the Final Fantasy team actually credit for this or just happen to be what it is. I feel like I want to say they did. The fact that it's loaded with dinosaurs
yes.
is great.
Yes.
Because anybody knows the basically as you work through the Southwest, especially particularly in Texas and even Arizona, of just there are so many dinosaur fossils that roam through there. There used to be an ocean that basically ran through the entire where all that desert of basically would be West Texas, which used to be an ocean. They still study fish out there, like historic fish, along with dinosaurs and dinosaur bones. They have like petrified forests. They have dinosaurs just all through these areas in what we know is like the Big Bend Mountains, the Christmas Mountains, the Davis Mountains. You can go out there and you're just finding dinosaur bones. Like there's just skeletons sitting out there, especially getting covered in people's yards and stuff. And so obviously I worked out there a lot, but seeing how much is in there, so knowing how much dinosaurs they put in walking through that area is just kind of cool. Of like, so did you all know that we just
They
study
had
dinosaurs
to
out
have.
here or
They had
not?
to have. I
I
feel like
did
they had
not
to
know.
because. Oh yeah, they do. Did you not know
What
that, Andrea?
the?
Yeah.
No,
So
I mean, I just assumed that we had a lot of, I don't know, we just happened to have a lot of people
so
around here that study dinosaurs. I don't know why, but that's cool.
So there is actually at my old campus at the University of Texas, there's preserved T-Rex tracks that go through the center of our Natural History Museum from when
What?
they were in this part of Texas. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
like if
really
you
cool.
a lot of the riverbeds that go out towards out towards basically like I said western and there's not much out there in field and roads. You can just go to the riverbeds and you'll find dinosaur
Yeah.
tracks and they have them marked off and they make them little spots for them. But yeah, no, they're stuff that's all
I
over the
want to
place.
I think one of
thank you, Bill Nye.
I think one of the other things that's really cool that's also really small is the naming structures for each of the zones. So you'll notice that there are different patterns for Iricopacha, Kazumulka, Tlialol, and Shaloni and all the areas within there. And the reason that is they're kind of replicating, or I think, I don't know if they did this. If it just happened to be little happenstance, good on you, Square. But like it kind of lines up with the way that like Quiche, which is like the Mayan language, Nahuatl, which is the Aztec language, and I don't know much about Andean like indigenous languages because I'm not Peruvian, but I know that those two fit. And then when you go into Shaloni, you have a lot that kind of mimics the way that Native American languages are. And the reason that that's really important is especially in that northeastern part where we see like the big representation of like what looks like native tents is because the southeast was filled with Osage, Choctaw, Chickasaw, like a lot of native tribes, and so I think, like you said, Matt, I don't know if the devs meant it, but I feel like they did, and it's really dope.
Eddie, why are you Eddie? Because you brought this Yeehaw land upon us. What do you got?
I just realized because Andrea was talking about how much of the South is like, visible there. There is a fate where you fight like a giant catfish. So
Yes,
Yes.
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 I'm not gonna lie. The first time I fought the Namas. He was like, "Why are you here?
Yeah.
What do you have to do with this?" And then I was like, "Oh, you're a catfish."
Yeah, they're noodling. Come on.
That's what you taught me because I didn't know what that was called, but I was like,
Noodling?
holy shit.
Oh, noodling? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was, but my
So
again, mama comes up a lot in this, but I have a mama and a
okay,
papa.
so
God
for
bless
those
them.
of you that don't know what noodling is, essentially down here, the way they catch catfish is you basically kind of rub your hand in some like basically whatever, not chum, but sort of like chum, and
Bait?
you
Yeah.
basically bait. You stick your thumb down into a crevice of rocks, and you wait for a catfish to come up and basically snag your thumb. And then when they do, you yank it out, and it's called noodling. It's very intensive. People love doing it out here. It's also quite dangerous, but not as dangerous as you think. But yeah, so basically, you look for these crevices where catfish usually hang out underneath these large rocks and riverbeds, or even kind of lakes, and you just stick your arm down in there and hope something bites your hand, and then you yank it out. The problem is that the danger is that people sometimes get snapping turtles and you lose your thumb. Or sometimes people have actually been pulled under, depending on things. Usually, it's for, to be fair, a lot larger people, so they do not like they actually tell you, hey, if you're a little smaller, we kind of need to hold on because people will get pulled down under. Catfish are very aggressive species of fish.
They eat
And
pigeons.
yeah, and so like, but yeah, that is how a lot of people catch catfish down
Eddie.
here, particularly the large ones. They just stick their hand down there and said, "Get it."
Look,
For those
my
listen-
uncle.
Just
Oh,
use
I
like a
was-
stick or something.
They
Like
they have my uncle had a little catfish pond and he would go to the Piggly Wiggly and they didn't have this in Shawnee. They need to put a Piggly Wiggly in there. And he would get like old livers and put them down in there in his hand and they want to eat those cow livers and he would, I guess what you call noodling, and shove
Yep.
his hand in
Yeah.
there. Also my cousin got hit in the face with one of them things. Hurt, so don't get hit in the face with a catfish.
And just imagine these aren't like the like little tiny like perch or trout you see. These things are probably at least a foot, if not 2
It's the
feet.
fate boss.
Yeah, it's the
yeah,
bait
yeah,
boss.
they're about 2 to 3 feet that these people are trying to wrangle up with just their hand and arm. Which kind of, Eddie, you need a big stick, and I guess they count their arm as a big stick.
I am assuming that everybody who is listening to the audio version only of this is making the same face that Eddie is making right now if they are not from the South. But I hope we've imparted some Southern wisdom to y'all today.
Eddie, would you try noodling if I gave you some like
No,
why not?
because I like my thumbs.
I'll take you. We'll go to the Piggly Wiggly and we'll get some livers, Eddie, and
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm gonna write a letter to Yoshida to ask him to put in a Piggly Wiggly and an HEB.
Oh, thank God.
We don't need spearfishing anymore. We need noodling.
Oh, that would be so good. Oh,
Is there anything else anybody wants to say about the zones before we move on? Because I feel like we can go on for them forever.
One more.
Okay.
Urquapacha, I did like what feels like a political kind of divide in the north and the south there because of the history of it. And I will say that again for spoiler cast, but the stark contrast in the northern and southern parts of those maps like hurt. And I loved it. So that's all I'll say for now.
So I do want to know, and obviously not really a spoiler, but we kind of know of like, will I get to make more tequila? Because obviously tequila is found throughout some of the recipes. They have it everywhere. We don't get to drink it really.
The children of Urquapacha are making tequila.
We haven't figured out if those are children. Are those children? I don't think
they're moonshining. Okay.
Yeah.
They're not children. They're just tiny people.
Oh.
Sure.
They're like taller Lalafels. Talafels.
Talafel.
The Talafels are making mezcal. No,
Well,
I do agree with you. I would like more, which I think is probably the larger thing, is there are so many moments in the main scenario and in the side quest when you're going through the zones that I thought like, oh, you're just doing this and we're just going to kind of toss it out next. And it never really does. Like that mezcal part actually has pretty significant importance to understanding what's going on. And I think that it's all those little levels that ultimately create something larger. And I would even like to call out my favorite thing about Urquapacha, which are the tiny little alpacas that decorate the stone walls that they have. They're like smooth alpacas right there, and they're adorable. So that's my last thing. Eddie, did you have a last thing? Or are you still
nothing for Well, just stuff about the last one, but that's obviously spoilers, so
Oh,
we can
yes.
save it.
Which, yeah. I have lots to say there. But I think outside of zones, the next big thing that came with this expansion were job changes and duty changes. We're going to kind of put these two things into one, but that's what we're going to talk about now. And the first thing I do want to talk about are the duties themselves and jumping into the dungeons, because I think the dungeons are actually a very good transitional thing for us to talk about from zones into the rest of this podcast, because they represent their zones really well too, which I think was something that I didn't expect. Like everything you saw from the zones previously tend to pop up. But Eddie, I know this was something that you really wanted to bring up talking about. So if you want to guide us talking about dungeons, I'm gonna kick it to you.
Um, they were good.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
so
Wow.
Agreed.
this might feel weirder, like when you're going back and like doing those dungeons, you know, in an expansion or two.
Dungeons.
But
I can. Okay,
sorry.
you're good.
Uh, the story moments that happen within the dungeons, I think, are like really fun. There's a moment in the first one where there's a cave in, and the reason for that cave in is like, uh, it's good, but it's also like I hate you, without talking too much about it. Um, and I think again, I think eventually it's gonna like you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that happened once upon a time. But I think they make things more interesting. They had us climbing ladders, which is a weird automatic thing, but it was still fun to like introduce verticality without just like putting you on a little geyser and like launching you into the air. But the mechanics for the boss fights themselves, like it felt challenging. And I know some people felt like the duties were a little too difficult, but these are like level 91 to 100 dungeons. Which you presumably have played through the game up to this point.
Yes.
So I think expecting a little more out of people, even if it's like for main scenario stuff, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I feel like if they keep on raising that bar, then like it'll make it easier for players to get into harder content,
Yeah.
which I know is like kind of a scary thing to take that plunge. But
Yeah.
I feel like this kind of like smooths it over a little bit.
No, I think the duties from a mechanical standpoint, at least the dungeon wise, it does feel like they kind of introduce new things, which is nice, but it does feel like they kind of start to stack because you can definitely tell the difference between the first dungeon and by the last dungeon, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought was pretty nice of like just difficulty. And even I think just looking back, as you said, kind of repeating the dungeons over and over again, I think eventually, obviously, they will be easy, and we'll see how they go as far as like when you start getting over leveled and we start getting more gear and higher, which we'll kind of probably talk about here in a minute. Kind of like the older content as you get higher, but at least for now, looking at you still have like the movement of having to move around, which is nice. I don't think there's only a few where I feel like we're just standing in
Yeah.
place at all times, and so even just with a general sponge, and so like the mechanics for the most part after about two runs, they still have some tricks up their sleeves, but overall, you can kind of pick them up. They have a routine, especially the first, I would say the first two are fine. But after that, they do get a little trickier.
Yeah.
But I do think they end up adding a little bit of different things that might keep people on their toes, and especially at least engaged in a way that doesn't seem to happen so much. But I do wonder how they'll look as we get further and you lose some of those
Yeah.
mechanics, per se.
Mhm.
And I think
I
that's like, oh, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Andrea.
I think for me especially, I've never looked really to the dungeons, I guess, to satisfy some of that need, but I also understand there are people who do want like more of a challenge in that sort of content, that 4-man content. So the dungeons, I didn't really feel that they were hard myself until we got to the fifth one. And then we got to that fifth one, and I was like, "Oh, I got to pay attention." And I say that in I'm not good or anything, but I do like Savage and like screw around in Ultimate, but that's a whole other thing, talking about difficulty. But that one though, for me to go, okay, now I have to pay attention. Now maybe I need to like GCD heal a little bit because
Yeah.
we've eaten a whole lot of crap. That made a huge difference. And then the expert dungeons this time around, you have to pay attention. And I do kind of
Yes.
love Yoshida made a comment. Somebody tweeted it. I need to find the tweet and link it. Just like laughing about how Yoshida was pretty much just like, don't be greedy. Like, don't stand
Yeah.
Yes.
there and
Yeah.
like be greedy, move, get out the way, respect the mechanic.
Yeah.
So I did like that, and I don't know if they'll nerf the experts.
I hope
I
not.
can
I hope they
I
don't.
hope not.
yeah, my assumption is that they can see data, better
Yeah.
than we can, and if it would actually make a difference. Because I can always go do like Criterion Savage stuff if I really want like that kind of
Mm-hmm.
dungeon experience. But I do really like this like little window right now where the experts kind of hit hard.
So my big
I
thing for me with the dungeon content, you know, about like, well, I don't know what do
yeah.
people expect out of dungeons, and the main thing for me and why I kind of, at least for the terms of what we do, expect a little bit more overall, is just because at the end of the day, the dungeons are tied to almost 50% of the roulettes. It looks
Yeah.
like, or at
Mhm.
least 30 to 40%. So like, between the expert, the high level, the leveling, I guess technically main scenario is different, but you have at least three, roulettes. That you're constantly going to where you are running dungeons for that content. And so like if you're going to give that as part as a daily bonus and a daily thing, then having those kind of be worth something or at least somewhat engaging, I think is why I
Yeah.
would see them of like I would want at least something out of my dungeons
Exactly.
Mhm.
versus just kind of like, oh, whatever, I'll do something else because you don't always get the other part. You don't getting all
Yeah.
that for all your roulettes, I guess,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
daily.
And I think that that's like why, like, I know in my written review, I describe them as complex, not difficult, because I
Mm.
think that they have a lot going on, but they repeat themselves. So once you learn the mechanics for that first rotation, you know what to do in the next cycles until you're done. And I think that is two things for me. It's not a difficulty barrier that you can't clear, especially if you're communicating and paying attention to your party, or even just following where people go. Like, that is the simplest thing. Just go where the
Yeah.
people go. Don't stand away from people. If you if it, like just do that if you don't want to talk to anybody. But that complexity, what I think it does outside of that is it also makes people pay attention. And for me, like, and this is funny because there are a lot of jokes about how I'm a many stack tank because I don't do mechanics. But it's not because I'm not good at it, or it's not because I don't care about them. It's a lot of the time, especially with Endwalker content, I was really bored because it was just a giant circle and a giant hitbox, and I just stood there. And that, or as we were going back and doing the older content, as our gear scores went up, the dungeons were just way too easy, and they didn't have mechanics that had me keep moving or had me keep going and had me keep being engaged. And I like the fact that even though I think the last fight of the second dungeon is pretty like complex, and I sit up in my chair every time I do it, I know exactly where to go now. And I think that that's one of the things that I really like, because I I switched. I like playing tank because it makes me think, and I want to think. I want to be engaged in the dungeon, and it does actually suck when I kind of like start to tap out. And I think that that's what this more complex content gives us. And it is, like you said, it's Yoshida asking you to respect the mechanics and to respect the design. And I think we do, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, is I do think because of what happened with Endwalker and the large push towards catering to those solo players and those and like the MSQ only folks, which is fine if that's how you play, but you did lose some of those complexities or the types of mechanics that fostered that type of teamwork in those things. And I really, really want that teamwork. It's really fun. I don't know. That was
Yeah.
kind of a rant, but it. I love these
No,
dungeons.
I think what in that sentiment, I think what really feels like it hurts the dungeon experience is every Endwalker in-game dungeon, I guess you would say, like the level 90 expert stuff. There was even at launch, I didn't really have to respect it. Maybe aside from like the dead ends, and that was early on, and I would have like a Dark Knight not pop anything, and then that would suck and be hard, but that was just like, a one-off scenario. Uh, but other than that, I think every single expert I could just like kind of turn my brain off and just do my scholar thing, excog myself, and not move the whole time, and just hit broil. And that's kind of, I don't know. I do like having to pay attention to those little dudes that are all. I'm not going to get too much into it, but in one of the expert dungeons, there's one where you have to dodge little things trying to grab you. And it's nightmare crap when you're trying to cast, and it's also kind of nightmarish whenever you have a higher ping. But if you kind of pay attention to the hitboxes, I mean, you know your ping, you get familiar with your ping. I play with like 150 or so sometimes, and I dodge them. Not always, but I might have like a couple vulns, but don't mind your business. Like, I'm alive. So,
But did
otherwise,
I die?
yeah, exactly. I like that little bit of a challenge in those experts. And if I'm gonna complain too much about it, I'll probably just go farm EX. But if they can be more relevant, like on content when they release and feel like a challenge in that way, I think that's good. Also,
Yeah.
this game I don't think prepares people very well to take the bigger next step, which is going into EX, going into
That's
Savage.
fair.
And I hope that this dungeon content is kind of like a tease of, well,
Yeah.
okay, if you feel like you've done this a lot, try EX next. Like,
Yeah.
if this is no longer that hard and you are getting it, go try EX. And then after EX, go try Savage and then Ultimate. And then, your world first. Remember me when y'all are world
Oh my
first and
gosh.
give me a shout out.
Yeah, that we're going. Okay. Eddie, so I guess Eddie, because obviously you want to talk extensively the dungeons. Was there anything particular in any of these dungeons that you felt just kind of stood out? I mean, obviously you talked about maybe some of the story mechanical stuff. Was there any new mechanics or things that you had to do that you're like, you know what, I need more of this happening in dungeons, even if you're just running for your life?
So there's that hallway in the third or fourth dungeon, um, where there's just a bunch of stuff going off at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Trying to think about
like
what
I
that
love,
is.
I love, I love how chaotic that is. And yet like I don't die,
Yeah.
somehow.
Your healer.
It feels like control. Well, no, I don't get hit. More importantly.
Wow. Okay.
I don't need a healer.
He has
I don't get
clemency,
hit.
Andrea.
Yeah. Divine Veil, Clemency, Holy Sheltron, Go
No,
on
I think
Strike.
the kind of we said
Um,
they had a little introduction to like these felt like these little mini boss type things in between the bosses. I know they've kind of had them there, but like
Yes.
we had a
The mini boss usage has
Yeah.
been very good this round of content.
I'm
Oh
trying to
yeah, there
think
were a
of.
couple that we rolled up on that I was like, oh boss, and it wasn't.
yeah.
And I think I was literally just talking about this yesterday with another, like we saw that happen more in ARR, and then that kind of went away. But yeah, there are some really spicy AoEs that keep going
Yes.
out until you kill that ad. And there was a lot of that in Heaven's Ward too. The Vault I can remember struggling on as a baby scholar. But yeah, no, that those kind of like really spicy AoEs, that's like, remember to use your scholar ability, Sacred Soil. So I can't just sit there and Art of War the whole time.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, there was a boss that looks like a Marlboro in like the last dungeon, I think, or the one before it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun.
I'm not gonna
I don't
lie, I
know.
thought you were talking about the cigarettes for a second. I was very
Well, they're
confused.
named after the cigarettes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well there we go.
You like the smoking bad
Fun
breath, whole
facts.
thing.
There's a
Um,
giant cigarette in the last one.
but no, I can't think of any specific mechanics, but I just feel like you really have to be paying attention more. It
Yeah.
is more engaging, and they're all like gorgeous, especially like one of the expert
Yeah.
dungeons.
Yeah.
There's a part where you come off like a water slide, and you're just looking at the hills and like buildings
Yeah.
put up on them, and like it looks like something out of like a documentary almost, except for the fact that you're all using magic and beating up monsters. Um, yeah, I'd love this dungeons, and I can't wait to see what like the next, you know,
Yeah.
patches are gonna have for that sort of
I
content.
I will say I've never felt like I could danger Dorito before, but I know that I can danger Dorito. I think it's the second dungeon last boss, the one with the pushbacks and the fists. Is it second dungeon last boss or third dungeon last boss?
The fists and the knockbacks.
I should have
Yeah,
this
the blue
Wikipedia page open.
circles on the ground.
Wow, you guys are doing a great job for everybody.
I am.
Saying colors
Blue
and saying
circles. The
Everyone
blue
open your
circle's
Wikipedia.
familiar.
I swear I've played.
It's the
Anyway,
third dungeon. It's
all
the
that is,
cenote.
yeah. Okay, Skydeep
Oh.
Cenote. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, Skydeep Cenote. I think ultimately, like that is the thing that like feels really awesome as a player is to like get the mechanics so well that you think that you can call them out or lead other players, and that's a feeling I've never had before. Like I'm usually the one begging my FC folks to call stuff out to me or putting a danger Dorito on somebody else, and I don't know, it feels really really cool. So
I love that. I love hearing that. That's like a goal, like a personal goal too for myself. Just because I feel like even though I've played forever, if you get me trying to call something out, I freeze.
yeah,
I could not do it. I just go,
yeah.
go down. Which makes no sense. But no, I love that.
And
Also one more dungeon thing, the music.
yeah, oh,
Music goes so
music's,
hard.
it
Oh
does,
my
it
god.
does
Yeah.
every single dungeon,
The
every
dungeon
single
with the laser
boss.
hallways, like I need that song like playing all the time.
The level
It's so
99
good.
one? Can
No,
you say the name of it?
97?
Okay. Okay. Well, the level 99 one is I was like sitting up in my seat and like tapping my foot, and it's good.
Yeah,
So
they're all
I will say going off of that because we've given a lot of praise to the mechanics and the complexities that have come with this new round of content in Dawntrail. Do you all think that this ages legacy content more to the point that you don't want to necessarily do it?
kind of well, because like so, you know, I feel like with past expansions they've kind of reworked classes more or like made them more complex.
Yeah.
Like, certainly White Mage from 50 onward, you know, you get like your flowers and then the blood lily or whatever. Uh and I feel like because they didn't change, at least the classes that I played, they haven't changed so much from 90 to 100. And so it feels like they're in a good place. And I know they're going to rework them or whatever, but going back to like 50, 60, 70 content, like where you're losing big parts of your, like, I don't even, whole Sheltron is just boring. I don't like it. It sucks. I want Holy Sheltron, but that's like an 82 ability. So you don't get that unless you're doing something in
Yeah.
like the last quarter of the content that they've ever released. Um, So like, yeah, I think it hurts and it sucks to go back. I mean, you could still get like Sastasha and you'll have like two abilities
Yeah.
It is
and
bad.
I
Yeah.
I
yeah,
I guess so. I have feelings here that hopefully won't eat up the 2 hours, but I think about what part of this is a problem, and then I separate it into, okay, well, what part of this is like a thing I don't like that is a problem, but
Mm-hmm.
is not something we should fix. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that
It
makes
Like,
sense.
absolutely makes sense because I think that's probably
yeah,
where I am at with a lot of this, to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah.
Because I think they have a legitimate problem. I think there's some stuff that I don't like, and there's some stuff I don't know what we can do to fix it. But I also think that the way, kind of we talked about in the zones, if we come back, in particular this MMO, particularly how they love to weave us back into older zones, into older
Mm-hmm.
areas, that I think you have to fix some of this content
Mhm.
Yeah.
because we are going back, or I mentioned roulettes or anything else. Like you by default will be doing older content to do a lot of parts, especially when it gets to after a certain point, your dailies, you are doing older content. And so I think
Yeah.
at some point it needs to be, I don't necessarily always like it. I never really cared, but I think it's gotten tremendously worse
Mm-hmm.
Right.
to where, like I said, Satasha, depending on the class, especially the older new jobs they put in, or you're pressing two buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that kind of loops into one of the things I feel about the game is not teaching you very well whenever it's
Absolutely.
making that
Yeah.
jump in difficulty, because it's kind of just like, here you go, takes the leash off. We have no further guidance. We haven't really taught you how to use your skills or why you should do your rotation, this, that, and that. And
Yeah.
those kinds of parts of the game they abandoned. They had it's not that mentor thing. It's like the little sprout thing where you can go and learn some stuff, and it's
Yes, I
kind
know
of
what you're talking
House
about.
useless.
of
Yeah.
the Smith or something,
Yeah,
Hall of the
yeah, the
Smith.
Smith
Something,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not very helpful, especially
You
for
want
learning
you want a
later.
real hot take right now?
What's that?
I believe a lot of this can come down to I think it's MSQ's fault
I
because
mean,
I don't believe you use any of your ability playing the MSQ for the most part,
That's
and you
yeah,
don't
fair.
learn, don't do anything. You
Yeah.
yeah,
read and watch cutscenes for 90% of the MSQ.
Well,
That's
just
yeah,
fair.
because they have to make it possible for any class to like complete, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but
that's
at the
what
end of the day, you
class
don't
quests
do
are
anything to
for.
learn your class throughout the
Yeah.
whole MSQ
Yeah.
for what you majority play.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that
I-
does tie into what you were saying, Andrea, about like it doesn't teach you how to make that leap or invest in
Right.
that way because it is detached from the class that you're playing, and like the role quests are supposed to help a little bit. But like
Mhm.
I leveled Dark Knight and I don't feel like I understand my powers any better than I did when I was just playing in PvP. So
Right, right. And there's some stuff that like I'm like, okay, I can make amends with this. I feel like this is kind of a fair compromise, whatever that may be. Because
Yeah.
for me, I am someone who I played a lot of MMOs. I really love that side of games.
Mhm.
But also I come from like this background of growing up with Final Fantasy. It's like my favorite series, really. So I absolutely understand it's like a Final Fantasy first and it's an MMO second. And I think a lot of MMOs are guilty of this, like everything lives in fan sites offline, how to learn how to play your class and all of that. But I look at stuff that feels a little egregious
Yeah.
and I read, so the Dark Knight tooltips I think are okay. But I would not like look at that class and expect anybody to immediately understand it either without like watching a video.
Yeah.
My dumb baby brain couldn't at least. But that being said, looking at like the astrologian tips from last expansion, at least, I haven't really read them as much
Yeah.
after the game launched. That was egregious. Like they were bad. And in some cases, they were wrong. They
Yeah.
didn't even do what they said they did, and they didn't fix them for a while. And when you take that into something more difficult, that becomes a problem.
Yeah.
I think right now, because we don't even know what they're going to do with Viper, really, we just know that they're going to change something. I tried to read those Viper tooltips.
Yeah.
They don't make sense to me. I had to have someone come and explain this job to me. And I've been playing for a while. I think it's a problem when your tooltips are so messy and convoluted
Yeah.
that they don't make sense. There is no like logical way to just kind of lay those out and get them without having to go to 50 million different fan sites.
Well, and I think that's where like the problem lies, right? Like I think that like I think one of the core problems of Final Fantasy 14, and not problems, but like one of the weights that it has to carry, right, is that it is both a MMO and you're having people come to it for that, and then you're also having people come to it for the Final Fantasy piece, and they're making a bridge. And when it comes to doing this legacy content as any of the higher classes, or just going back and just running them in general, or leveling up a new job, which is something that this game does sell itself on as a reason for people to come play. You can pick up a new job at any time. I only have 2 to level 90, and I'm working on Dark Knight now. And I think instead of investing in bridging the gap between somebody playing MSQ by themselves and getting to go into the other content with other people, I think the answer that they've leaned on is just simplify things at the back end. And so it keeps the legacy content getting more and more simplified, which then gets harder for people who have been playing that content for a while, but it's accessible to new people and people who haven't been doing the dungeons, but you're kind of like, there's kind of like these two sides of a population that just keep like bouncing, like Yoshida keeps and the team keep bouncing the ball kind of like back and forth between them. And I don't know if it's been brought into balance or how much they're even trying to just create the bridge from one to the other.
But my question would then be, do you think even the legacy content, particularly you could probably go into old Alliance raids, is even actually accessible? Because they burn through mechanics, we burn
That's
through
fair.
stuff. Even with high, you basically have none of your kit to learn stuff, and you kill everything so fast that, like, at the end of the day, you don't have to do anything, to be honest.
Unless it's Dunscape.
Well, no, well, that's what I'm saying, though. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
there's very few things where you're actually learning
Yeah.
anything if you are new.
You can
No, I
tell
don't
where
disagree.
some of the old stuff, the eye level sync, it was, I remember they explained it as like whenever they crunched some of the numbers, some of this stuff. I think they actually talked about this a little bit with the item level sync problems at the preview event that we went to, Kate, where some things got hit a little harder because of how complicated that crunch was on their end. I'm not about to sit here and pretend like I am a big dev brain, but that was like the at a glance kind of layman's terms breakdown that we got. That stuff, I think it's more of a problem in alliance raids for sure.
Yes.
I do appreciate that when we go back to older content, it has to be more rewards driven for those of us that have played a lot, because we are offering essentially to just go through and help someone that's new to complete these things, because otherwise we don't have a whole lot of incentive. And that actually brings me to another problem that I had with the relic last expansion because
Oh
my favorite
gosh.
relic is the Heavensward
Yeah.
relic, where it's like, go do this a million times, even though it's getting on your nerves that you have to go in the vault 50, 100 times. You need to do it so you can get your relic. And something that is, I think, for the longevity of the game, so important to me too, is new player experience, because that does mean I can get my friends hooked on this with me.
Yeah.
And so I think Relic drives that content and keeps it more alive, especially when you have this influx of old players going back and doing those things. And a tombstone dump doesn't always, because you can say do your roulettes, but there are other ways to grind tombstones like hunt trains and stuff that are just
Yeah.
as efficient, if not better. That does not keep people going back into that older content and doing it with them. So if they give us more incentives to go back and do some of those things, even more than just like tombstone bonuses, because the DPS queue sucks. So we don't always feel like sitting there and waiting for 2 hours just so we can go back and hit one button. I think that that's probably a better solution for at least our end
Yeah.
of things. I don't know if it teaches people to play
Play.
better, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's not, if Yoshida looks at who is playing and he sees that most of them are here for the story anyway, maybe that's not as big a problem as it is to me ultimately.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate going through with the trust, because if y'all haven't done that yet, it's hilarious. It's sitting, and we'll talk about like gaining weight and stuff in some of the Endwalker dungeons. It's
So
hilarious.
the funny part is we talked about before about like what do dungeons bring to you, and I'm like, yo, I have to sit in a 30-minute queue to
Yeah.
go play Satasha and press one button that is
Yeah.
mind numbing. Yeah, I want my dungeons a little more engaging.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and
And I get nothing out of it other than tombstones that I could literally run PvP twice and hit the same amount.
Exactly.
which
And
So
so
maybe the answer might be like what Yoshida was saying, is more rewards.
yeah.
Uh,
Which I mean, like
better.
we know we're getting a new reward structure. We don't know what it is. We just
Yeah.
know it's on the roadmap. I also do think like to that point of like, oh my god, I left my
while
brain.
you think your thought, Eddie, what do you think here? You've been
Yeah.
over here being a bystander, fly on the wall, in between.
I'm
I
gonna
know
let
you
these
have.
people say
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
hot
Come on, Eddie.
takes.
I know.
I said the first thing about how you
I
get
know, but
sent
you need
back
to bring
to
some spice into this. Come on.
Say something
it.
wholesome, like you did.
Okay,
Say
so
some wholesome.
that's the thing. I was thinking about what you're saying about how like you burn through mechanics and stuff in the earlier alliance raids. Um, and I was like, well, I mean, that's not really not an issue because you're just getting through it for the story. But then like you're doing it to gear up like you would be
Yeah.
doing modern raids and
Correct.
stuff. But then like if like it's like why are we even doing this? Like
Yeah.
if we're just like zooming through it just for my like handout of 2 million experience, then like it feels kind of pointless.
Yep.
um and I don't know if the solution is to like just artificially make it harder, because I just think that because it's older it's simpler, and
It's hard to balance everything.
it's just not as fun as doing like Scathe or I mean I would take like Aglaia and all that, or
Also, like
Puppets Bunker over that.
the weird thing
Well,
for
the weird
me
thing is
it
that- so-
actually bothered me more when we would burn through mechanics on the Endwalker raids than it does when we burn through mechanics on the other ones, because I
Same.
shouldn't be burning through mechanics on Aglaia or Thalia or Yerfseen. Like those should still maintain that difficulty. Like it feels good when you're like pressed for time,
Yeah.
but the fact that like Dunscape or the math one, what's the math one?
The Evilist Alliance raid.
Yes.
Oh,
Like-
don't take me in there. That's
I
hard
love
for me.
those.
But
Those I
like
love
the
those
fact
things.
that those mechanics still stand, but the most recent raid content I burned through, like I'm hoping that when we come into the Arcadian raids, we're coming into something that has a better longevity, because like that you can't just build for people who pop in and pop out at one store. You got to build for that longevity piece.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I had a thought and then I immediately forgot it. Damn it. No. Oh, here it is. Okay. There are some things that suffered like in Singer Normal really bad, because there is story stuff that goes
Oh.
off of the boss, and it is locked to that. And there are things that the NPCs will say in that, like dialogue, in the 8-band content with other players, and you don't get all of that if you push through. And I know they patched that finally after like over a year of it doing that, but this stuff is bad. Like there are parts of the first Alliance raid that you can skip. And it makes me mad for new players that are coming in to do the story, and we are DPSing this thing so hard that they don't get to see really cool little transitions and scenes because we DPS the thing so quick.
Which I guess kind of go to lead into kind of the trials of this stuff, which to be honest is a 8-man content has had a lot of problems with, in my opinion, over the years of just like having the story blend with these trials where you get these weird, like you're in the middle of a fight and a 3-minute cutscene happens and you're like, what are we doing here? And it's great the first time, maybe the second, but by the 18th time I ran this trial, I do not care about this damn cutscene. But also, to your point, it's unfair for anybody else that's coming in. And so it's like, where do you balance this? And I think that's been a problem throughout a lot of the expansions. I know there's at least one specific trial in this expansion that has that issue where you just completely go out and it's just a whole entire cutscene for about 2 minutes. And so I think 8-man content has been, particularly with the story component, has been hard to balance that, which gets interesting.
I think the solution there to me was kind of what it seems like they're doing now. They had the Four Lords quest in Stormblood. God, I almost said Stormbringers. And there are extreme fights.
Twisters is coming soon.
God, I said Dawntrail I don't know how many times leading into this, and it was so embarrassing. Shout out to everyone that I edit your pieces for. If I typed in Dawntrail, I'm so sorry. But no, I think taking those cutscenes out of Extreme was fantastic. I remember Savage, Proto Carbuncle, and the Pandemonium.
Oh my God.
So in Pandemonium Normal, you have that cutscene, which badass cutscene, first of all, like incredible cutscene. Love that so much. Feels like something out of Godzilla or like a kaiju movie. I loved it. In Savage, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna suck so much because there's gonna be a 2-minute cutscene in the middle of this Savage fight, and it's gonna annoy the crap out of me for whenever I want to farm it. It's not there. There's like a jumping mechanic that's a lot of fun, but it's not in the Savage version of the fight. But in older fights, they did put cutscenes in some of the Extreme and Savage versions, and that was a pain in the ass. But I think the solution is whenever you do the more difficult version and not the normal story version, take the cutscene out.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Sometimes it's part of like a transformation because, like
everything has to get hotter. So those hot transformations.
Yeah, the transformations are good. I'm very excited about the transformations in some of this. I remember when we went and we did X-Step Savage, we went back and did some of those older ones with y'all. That was a lot of fun, that transformation. Yeah, where he comes
I mean, it's just,
yep.
You're always going to run into issues even with normal content because in the day, like we can all say just go play extremes, and that's great and fine and dandy, but that's also going to be still very
it limits
very
everything.
limit what not only what people do but also to what they are doing anyways. Like at the end of the day, I don't think you're running that all the time. You still need to do other content for a lot of time, depending on what you're saying, where you need. I guess you could just do hunt trains all day if you just want to skip your roulettes, but at some point you're like, wow, that sounds mind-numbing. But at some point you will be doing other types of content, and so it does lead into the issue of like, what do you do for that type of content?
Yeah.
Right.
I like the hopefully maybe the stuff that's like Bozja in Eureka, not the
second. Yeah, I hope we get one of those again. We see. I do say on the trials, since we're kind of talking about trials, did everybody enjoy the trials this time?
Yes.
I think the music is even better in the trials than the dungeons, to be honest.
So the only one I didn't love was the first one, but when I did the extreme version, I loved it.
The first extreme is so fun. Yeah. There is a tank mechanic in it, that I love so much.
You're gonna lose your mind.
I thought the first one was like the first trial was extremely simple compared to the dungeons that preceded it. Like genuinely, I thought some of those dungeons were harder than that first trial. So I'm excited to jump into the extreme because I need it. Also Valorgramanda is amazing because he's essentially Quetzalcoatl, and I want to see him be really dope and make me do dope things as a tank. I really like the second one though. The second trial is very
love
good.
it,
and the third one is like
love it. Love the music.
We wiped multiple times last night, and I still really love that trial.
The songs are so good too. So like I think that makes dying a little less
Yeah.
painful. One last thing I wanted to bring up for both dungeons and trials, I love that it kind of tells you like, oh, the boss is doing this thing now.
Oh, yes, that's right.
It
Mhm.
doesn't really give you more than that, and it's they're on extremes, but it eventually goes away. So like,
Yeah.
it's just good to like help you realize the patterns as you're going through.
It's a good teaching
I
mechanism.
I like
Yes.
it, but also I've learned it blocks my view sometimes, and then I can't see shit.
And then you get hit
Mm.
by
And
the
then I'm like,
thing.
get rid of these words. Like, oh yeah, I gotta try to read these words.
I wonder, I mean, honestly, that's another big problem I have is that it's hard to see some of these mechanics.
Yeah.
So the accessibility fact, I mean, I don't have any visual like disability
The
Impairment.
issues.
graphics updates
Yeah.
made it
You mean how we're
very
all wearing glasses
hard.
like that, like here right now?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I just, I squint and I shrimp. Like
Yeah.
that's my big issue. And I get headaches. Kate, I think we are of
We
similar minds
We were
here.
yes.
just talking about a
Yes.
migraine earlier today, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is also why if I sound even more redneck,
Mm.
I had a fun migraine. But no, that stuff, I don't know, Matt. I'm glad you said that because for me, I can see that text better because of the like gradient underneath it, when historically it was like this very like subtle stroke around some of the text and I
Mhm.
couldn't see it very well and it drove me nuts. I wonder, can you move that in the HUD? I don't know.
Well,
Um,
hopefully.
That
yeah,
would be
yeah.
cool. Like that, I
I
Look,
think that would
haven't
make it more
looked.
useful.
so outside of
Yeah.
that, the only other thing is I'm glad we have great new ability visualizations. I now cannot see anything anymore.
I
Um,
turned those off.
what's the thing? We got these
That's
brand new visualizations. I'm like, awesome. Now I actually hate them and I can't see, and I might have to turn them off.
Paladin
I
looks cool for
always.
once doing their stuff, so I've left
I've
it
always
on
had
for
them
Oh
on.
my
me.
God.
Yeah, I've had them on limited, so it's been fine. Because I do think it's kind of
Limited's good. Yeah.
the immersion we're doing cool. But
Yeah.
now even the limited stuff is like, ooh, and I'm like,
Yeah,
no.
I wish there were more like tweaks we could make to it, but honestly, I have like going into like especially Savage stuff, I always turn the effects off. I play
Yeah.
with them at first, but then after a while, especially with the boss, it just even if it's not
Yeah.
making me squint or anything, it just is a lot for me. I get like what
Yeah.
overstimulated is that the yeah, I'm just like
Yeah.
It
overwhelmed by
triggers
seeing so
vertigo,
A
much.
yeah,
lot
too.
of visual
Yeah.
noise. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, like, kind of going from this too, because we've talked about mechanics, we've talked about the dungeons themselves. My last thing I will say about dungeons is I appreciate that the majority of the dungeons just have cute little things as the bosses, and I
Oh,
love
gosh.
it very, very deeply. Outside of that, though, I think one of the important things to take into consideration when it comes to running these new duties are jobs and how they've changed or how they haven't. So I am main tank. I really haven't noticed too many changes other than the thing that they're patching, which is holding enmity for now is actually really hard when you're pulling wall to wall and you have a caster in the group. But yeah, I will throw it to the folks who are playing classes who have been more deeply impacted by the job class changes.
Do we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, the hashtag healer strike elephant? Because we know that's
No, we
like
already
the
made a joke about it earlier.
Yeah.
So.
You're allowed to do whatever
Look.
you like to do.
that's the phrase that gives me hives. Matt knows. I think he tagged me on every random healer strike thing that he could find.
Look, I find it
Um,
fascinating.
uh,
The only thing I will say to it is, to be fair in something, the second boss in the first dungeon,
Sweet
we
baby boy
did
drowsy
we did beat it
with
at
healer.
75% health with no healer, with just
Okay.
a tank and 2 DPS.
that's hashtag
Who
healer.
needs
Yeah.
DPS? I did the first boss in
Oh,
one of the expert dungeons. Um, Everyone else was new, so like I was the only one left, and I got to
As a
30%
pally?
health. I got to
so
30% health, and I'm like, I don't want them to have to wait like 5 minutes for me to kill it, so I'm just gonna die. We'll just come back in here.
you did the right
And
thing.
the exact same thing happened again. So I was like,
Oh.
okay, I'm doing this, and I killed
Yeah.
it from like 30%.
I think if it keeps happening, that's
pally?
like the issue.
Yeah.
So here's how I feel about like these scenarios, if I can say this eloquently. Um, Whenever it has a ton of health left, you hit the wall. Like the tank should hit the wall.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Matt, you saying you saw someone complete, or no, y'all completed it with 3 DPS. And my
We said
thing
we had a
there,
tank and 2 TPS with no healer.
yeah, sorry, that's what no healer. So I look at the no healer situation, and that tells me that the tank and or hopefully the DPS are using their mitigation buttons. They're alive. They are getting through the content all the way. If you're in a situation where everyone except the tank is dead and the boss is like, I don't know, 60-70%, was the tank hitting their buttons? Like, was mitigation going out? It's also the DPS job to admit half of them won't use their stuff.
Okay, I will defend us in a moment of like we've never had to use them because everything was so dumb. The amount of times I was just like, you know what, whatever, I don't have to
keep that stuff on cooldown.
And they were like, whatever. And then I have to actually use it this time. And I'm like, cool, I can press these buttons finally. Outside of when I used to use them, I used them when I was low on health, and I was like, I'm gonna save me. No, and that's what I'm going to do because you know why? Did never have to use them.
I promise you, your healer knows though. Your healer's watching.
I've asked healers, and sometimes they don't know. I'm like, hey, do y'all notice when I'm it? And they're like, no. What are you talking about?
Bad healer.
You have this ability, and I'm like, I don't know.
But
no, I do notice. They do notice now. It seems like, and I do think from whether the buffing helped or not that we did because that was an overall thing. It does seem to be a thing that actually matters now in what we need to do. And so that I do take credit of like, some of us DPS, we need to learn to actually use them and probably use them better timing. And I have to pay attention to raid wides now to actually use them on time. But yes.
Look, that's we watch or if you're a healer, you should be watching to see if
the healers, if they weren't on strike, they could yell at the DPS, but apparently they're just not there anymore.
I will say there is no healer strike, just to clarify for everyone confused. There is not one.
There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Exactly. There is no healer strike.
I did see a picture of somebody's duty roulette like thing, a duty finder, and it was all like tanks in need. So it's like, who's actually striking?
All the tanks went to go play Picto.
They're mad that we have to tank LB everything.
I want to use it more often.
I think it is a good sign if you have 3 people make it through the content when the healer's dead, because that does show that there are other people using their mitt. Maybe the healer's new and doesn't know what they're doing and they did die, but the fact that you can make it through the normal difficulty dungeon with 3 people is good. I think it becomes more of a problem if it is just the warrior soloing the whole thing, but that is not really what's happening to me. And if you are a really good player, let's be real, you have always been able to do content without a healer since, I don't know, like Heaven's Ward, people have been doing those kinds of runs, and for some reason it just like took off this time as like a talking point. But you're not doing that like right now in Valley Garmonda. Like nobody is like 8 manning this without a healer. There will be some spreadsheeting groups that like min-max it and do that. But that is not 99% of the player base. And we're not making the content for the 0.001% that can clear Omega Ultimate with just 1 Astrologian instead of 2 healers.
Yeah, it's like the Final Fantasy equivalent of Jackass, where you're like, no normal person's going to do this. But I did hear about a group that did a 8-tank EX1. Which, I mean,
like stuff. That's fun.
Yeah. But it's not like this is an indication of like the state of the game. Like,
exactly.
You're doing something totally out of the ordinary just for fun instead of being like, oh, this is a new meta. It's like, that's not realistic.
Well, and I will argue too, like, I think that like, and obviously like we'll get into like actual job changes like next, but like, the way that like I have to tank now is way more involved, which makes me stop shrimping and sit up in my chair because of the dungeon changes. And I think that that's just really good. And Pallies have no changes whatsoever. We got to keep our
we got a bigger sword.
Yeah, we did get a bigger sword.
And it's an off GCD, so
yes. We got a bigger sword. We got better mana regen with the additions to, was it Sepulture and the other thingy to Atonement, the 2 ones that they replaced?
Sepulcher and I don't remember.
I hope somebody, like, when they edit this, they supercut this to listen to all you go, the blue thing and the supercut and the this and the pound and the fisty fist. And I'm like, that's what I'm hoping we're going to
do. Yeah, Requiescat got turned. Yeah, Requiescat got changed. And Sentinel got changed.
Yeah.
And then also we got Reprisal.
Yes. Yeah. But we also got to keep our damage on a gap closer, which Dark Knights and Gunbreakers didn't.
Well, because Paladins, I think, did the least damage of the 4 tanks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
makes
and I
sense.
will say, if you do ever feel like things are too easy to heal, go into PF. I cannot express that enough.
Oh
Please go into
man.
PF. It is the wild, like it is wild out there. Like,
Anyway,
go
we
do it.
will
Okay,
get
so
to class changes now.
yeah, I'll start with mine because they're relatively easy. I was excited that we weren't gonna have to have get that we were losing the damage and our we didn't have to. I could play my ballots, all massive three of them. We already want to talk about class changes. Can I actually play my heart more often, please? That'd be great. But anyways, I thought it was gonna be nice, and I was looking forward to the change of that much. But also, you have to be in combat, and so it seems to be. We go back to the weird part, which we didn't really talk about, was the syncing and old content of like there's very little time that I'm actually having to use my ballots where I'm not even basically having on a target anyways. And so like I haven't felt that enough to really notice it other than it seems to mess more with my rotation than anything else because I'm like, oh, I'm technically not in combat right now
Yeah.
and I can't and since it's not a damage attack, I can't use it right off the bat. And so I've had to adjust that way.
Mm.
The switching to everything from single target AoE has actually been kind of nice. I don't know if my damage still does anything. I probably hit like a noodle still. But that's why I'm here to mitigate, you know? So
Uh-huh.
you all healers feel better. Um,
I'm watching.
This is a safe space, right?
not for me,
No.
apparently.
Okay, never mind.
I can
No,
I can feel the screams of all the healers in our FC right now.
so I was never current on content up until like the end of Endwalker. So everything that I did that was like harder content was like me just catching up and everyone else was like carrying me through it, right? All the random people that I got matched with. I never used interrupt, arm's length, or reprisal. And I would use mitigations when I was at like half health instead of at full health. And I have taken steps to be better myself. I'm learning, I'm listening. And I think but it's like there's people that like will just, healers that just use cure one and
Yeah.
people that do the bare minimum. I saw somebody who was just auto attacking during
Oh yeah,
like,
definitely.
and it's like, you don't have to like be an expert, but like just the desire to want to be a little better at what you're doing, like have some pride, like
So I
it's,
will say I've been teaching people how to do the
Have some
interrupt. I'm
pride in your
always
job.
I may not
yeah,
use my mitigation properly, but I use that interrupt button very much often. I feel like I'm the one people
You
I
are
that people
very good
forget.
at
appreciate you.
interrupts. That I will
People
say.
people forgot that that button existed for the longest time, which I'm glad they brought some of those back. I still wish they'd bring back some leg grays and other stuff that we had heavies, I
Yeah.
guess, that just take up space that I probably should just remove. But no,
Which
it is. I don't disagree with you, Eddie. There have been times where I'm like, yo, you don't have to be.
you
But can
just,
we like press the
yeah.
button? Press one, press two.
Um, yeah, it wasn't until the role quest for Endwalker that I needed to like learn interrupting because I'm like, how am I supposed to kill this thing? Like it's just charging up an attack and I don't do enough damage. Just use interrupt.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah,
about like the blinking bar
yes.
uh means that you can interrupt it. So like
It
it's
wasn't
never
always
too
that way
late to
either.
learn.
we just need to do like a PSA supercut of use your interrupt. Use your
Yeah.
Hey,
arm's length.
Also, arm's length is a tank cooldown. If you are a DPS taking
Yes.
damage, please pop it.
Don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. Sorry.
Oh my God.
I learned from Eddie. I did not use reprisal, which I found out was something that the two tanks and I think should be alternating using.
Yeah.
And arm's length and the other one that you mentioned, but I use them now and I moved them to my main bar so I could use them.
We love growth. See,
yeah,
that's
see, like this is all it takes a
and
village.
It
no,
does take a
it
village.
I think I tweeted this earlier, but I used an example of in Heaven's Ward whenever I was really just really learning how to actually raid and do things that drove me nuts. I thought I was really, really good at the game, and I wasn't, just so we all know. I
Yes.
was horrible. But I was stressing the whole party out because I wasn't using my other buttons, or I wasn't like taking those
Mhm.
approaches to the battle where I could be like, okay, I need to pop Sacred Soil with this part, or I should switch off cleric stance and like really heal. And the only way I would clear something was if I worked whatever poor white mage or astrologian was with me to death. Um, and so I wasn't good at the game. I was clearing stuff, but it was not because I was playing healer right. It was
I
just
mean,
because someone was hard
to
carrying
go
me.
full circle,
Yeah,
to
it's
kind of go
not
full.
asked of you.
Yeah, well, I was saying to go full circle, is this kind of back on the dungeon mechanical problems of something
Yeah.
not engaging. If the content, if you can clear it by being basically not paying
The
attention,
bare minimum.
yeah, the
Exactly.
bare minimum, you will never be forced to actually have to use these buttons, which then obviously then makes
Yeah.
makes you not great to play with when you
Right.
are then
So we're
in
saying
content for
is
the.
we were taught bad habits by the previous content, and Dawntrail is trying to break them, essentially.
Yeah, there's a good, I think the game played really well in like Stormblood with some of the balance. Heaven's Ward was
Yes,
rough. But in
I do miss
Stormblood, I
my
think it
cure.
played well. Yeah, and cleric, like taking cleric stance away from healers, I think everybody is still probably mad about that, but I think it's one of the best things to happen to the game. Like taking away some of the bloated stuff that didn't work as well and cleaning it up needed to happen. But I guess with some of the homogenization and all of that other stuff, it makes the job suffer. It oversimplifies some of the jobs. I get it. I had a point that I was going to make here, and now I don't know where I'm
Your
going
healer
anymore.
class points. We've skipped the strike. We've
Yeah.
gone to this. Press
Yeah.
buttons
Yeah, I was
more
gonna
than
ask,
one.
how is healing now?
Okay, so I think I've only done the first EX. I popped into the second EX a little bit. But the first EX is fun. With a static scenario when you're in Discord with a bunch of other people, yes, it gets way easier. I'm sure someone will be angry about it in like 2 weeks' time, like it's too easy. But Zodiac was too easy. Like if we want to talk about like
Oh my god.
EX stuff,
I
yeah,
expected
We're
another
seeing
Zodiac level
Andrea sell
challenge.
everything right now on her screen.
Oh my gosh, oops. Well, everybody,
Making the money.
it's my stream of sales hours. But no, I think that the EXs this time around are way more fun. And they're challenging. They have like some of the gimmicky things. And I think that there's a good use of punishing mechanics that I can recover from. And I know that's a difficult dance, and I really respect that they have it. I know with Gear Pad in like a month or so, this will be drastically easier. That's fine as long as the next EX is hard.
Yeah.
But all of that being said, I'm having a blast. I think in PF, it's wild. I will go out there into learning parties, and it's a lot of fun. It makes me a better healer when I am going out there and learning with other people who are also learning, because I am learning all of those raid skills that I don't think the game will ever really teach you that well, or most games in particular. But it's kind of like having that awareness, that raid awareness of who is down right now, who can I raise? Is it worth slow raising them? What is the boss doing? Like all of those little scenarios that you have to calculate on the fly. I think Valley Garmonda EX is really good at that, because there are some nasty bleeds that I think good mitigation, your scholar, all of that makes a world of difference. And I've felt really good being able to save some runs that would have otherwise been lost. So it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, with 7 other people that are like working on min-maxing, sure, it's easier, but it's a ton of fun if you
So
just
I have
put
two
yourself out
questions
there.
for you. Two questions for you. First one, how is healing and stuff and not an EX? Because in the day, while that is fun and obviously challenging stuff, at the end
Mhm.
of the day, you probably will still spend most of your time not doing that type of content. And the second one, this may maybe call out you and other healers of, is it a difference? Should we take notice as DPS and dead people of whether we have been res fast or slow? Because now, after saying that, I'm like, do I need to know whether I've
Oh my God.
been appreciated
Matt, you are never
or
as
not?
important as me or Eddie. You're gonna have to get that through your head.
That's okay.
But I might be more important than other DPS, and so I need to know.
If we have 4 DPS dead and one of them is a summoner or a red mage,
Well, we
I
do know
will,
that. That is auto, yes.
yeah, I will raise the summoner or the red mage. If one of the DPS are dead and they have a party buff, if they're a bard and nobody else has a party buff, if they're just like greedy black mages, then okay, I'm raising you first so we can get that party buff. But you know, it's kind of like an order of operations there. You know, you remember Pim Dawson's that's how I work that out in my
Healing
head.
PEMDAS.
Please
Yeah.
revive my dear Aunt Sally.
Please survive. Yeah, no, that's kind of how I look at that stuff. But no, you bring things to the table like songs, tactician.
A good
If you-
vibe.
Yeah, good vibe. If you hit your tactician button and the rest of the DPS aren't using their
Look, I use
mitigation buttons,
tactician a lot. Okay.
I will heal you.
I use that one
so
probably more
I
than the other
will.
one, which I don't know if is better or worse, but
I will res you.
I feel
I'll
like this was
prioritize
just a
you.
personal quest. Like you arranged this podcast just so that you could ask these questions.
I
Look,
like how
we're trying to do growth. We're trying to build and be better.
Yeah.
they let black mages move their ley lines, but then they gave ley lines to like the Pictomancer, so now they have to sit there and paint for 5 spells before they can do their finisher.
I love that they're just like drawing mid-fight. Well, I don't know.
Yes, but the first
It's so
question of
fun.
healing and regular
Yeah.
content and normal content,
Yeah.
how has that been?
Yeah. So I think in the later trials, it's been a lot of fun, because there are some pretty nasty, like, I think some of the hardest things to heal are the continuous damage things, no matter the type of content, that chips away constantly. So like
Yes.
your Akmorns, like those group wide AoEs, like all that other stuff that just hit and hit and hit. I love that as a scholar, especially because it makes me use Sacred Soil instead of going for energy drain. All that type of stuff I love. I've had that way more. I feel like that stuff makes a difference. It of course with GearPad, like I am kind of having a much like I don't know, it's all getting smooth right now and some of the expert stuff for me. But whenever I am just like hugging it and using Duty Finder, I'm picking up a lot of like new people that are just going in and it's fine. Like it's fun. I don't want to tell them the mechanics because I have fun watching people experience stuff for the first time. So if they come in and I'm doing this with like not static people or not people that I expect to farm like the dungeons for tombstones or something, then I'm patient and I have fun raising people constantly. And also, I mean, no matter the content, if you take me into Ultimate or a dungeon, if there's a way to die, I will die. So I
I
still
will
I don't
say the
know.
number of times I've seen you die rubbernecking.
Oh God, yeah, that's if
R.I.P.
there's one
Pico. Um,
there's one thing
Mm,
about
God.
me is if someone dies, sometimes I will die just like watching and laughing. Um, so it's the talk shit get hit
Look, people who
thing.
run off the
Um,
stage or backflip off the stage, it's always going to kill somebody else.
Yeah.
It's just what happens.
Matt, who could be doing that right now with
Who-
their
I mean,
who
I
little
do it and
backflips?
then I
backflip?
watch other people do it too, so it's fine. Sometimes I join them. It's okay.
Um,
They don't want to be left alone.
yeah, I think I caught up to current content with when they released the second round of Pandemonium raids. So like
Mhm.
going in and doing Proto Carbuncle, like when nobody knew what they were doing and no one knew what to expect is like the most fun that I think I've had with the game, and I can't
Yeah.
wait for tomorrow when that happens again.
2 weeks. But yeah, yeah.
No, tomorrow's
Well,
normal.
Savage. Oh, I thought you were talking about Savage though.
No, just
Savage. Okay,
normal.
okay,
Like
okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
I mean Savage too, but like that's a whole other beast that I'm
Yeah.
scared of.
Yeah. No, that's
Uh,
fun. The day one stuff is fun. I
yeah.
love doing stuff day one. And I think that's kind of what's
Yeah.
this game has spoiled me on to talk about some of that like patch cycle stuff. That we get a lot of updates. We get a
So,
lot of frequent updates.
so we'll say to end this piece, Eddie, tell us about Picto. Because you have quite a few classes tonighty. How do you feel, or like higher level, how do you feel about playing Picto as a ranged DPS and as a caster?
Um, so I have Red Mage. I have Summoner to 90 technically because I leveled the Scholar. But no, like I like Red Mage a lot. It's it's very mobile. With Pictomancer, it does feel more like a traditional caster where you are have to like you have to sit there and like get ready, your creature motif or your weapon
Yeah.
motif. But then like once it's ready to go, like you're just like bam, 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 bam. Here's a Moogle that laser beams you. Looney Tunes hammer, like you're literally doing spins, and I think the whole buff that you have while you can use the hammer is called Hammer Time.
Mhm.
Uh, and then the raid buff, the Starry Night thingy, Starry Sky, whatever, like it, it's all so good. The Limit Break, where the what is it like the what is the creature called, Andrea, or
Mhm.
the Limit Break monster from the Pictomancer thing, the one that
Oh,
Crowl like paints up.
I don't know.
It's from like Sistash, the Copperbell Mines. It's like one of those little things that like
Spriggan?
shows up. A Spriggan, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then it like blows up, and then there's like little like sparkles. It kind of reminds me of like an SNES game, but
Oh, that's
obviously
fun.
not pixelated.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. I love the way that it uses color in all the spells. It's like fire and red, arrow and green, water and blue because RGB, and then you have cyan, magenta, and yellow for the subtractive palette, and then those add up to holy and white or meteor and black, and like it works like just so well. I don't know.
Mhm.
um it almost feels like a stroke of genius to be like, oh, like these elements are gonna make up these spells, and these elements are gonna make these spells, and the colors match them perfectly. Um, but like, yeah, again, I haven't used Black Mage very much, so I don't know about that. But and Picto doesn't have a dot, I don't think. At least I hope it doesn't, because I haven't been using it the whole
Oops.
time. Um, but yeah, like it's hard to just sit there and like get a spell ready, but like once you do, like it's fun to like just let it
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's just a spectacle to use, and it's all the visuals. I mean, I know you said it sounds kind of gross, but like it's delightful to like.
I don't like the sploochy noises.
Yeah, that makes sense. But like the Moogle that like drops him and then fires a laser beam, like it's just so much fun. It's great.
I've also died watching them. So
They're so delightful. And then in PvP, you summon
The
a
fat
Moogle.
chocobo.
Yeah, Chocobo that like drops a cake and then it pushes everyone away from it. It's great. It is, but you're like it's a delayed summoner. You are summoning stuff, but you're doing like the hard work first and then letting it all out of the once instead of um summoning the creature. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's great.
So I think the last question for this section before we go into MSQ and heavy spoiler territory. This is a question I really want to ask everybody because I've been kind of thinking about it back and forth. So at PAX East and a few of the interviews and showcases that Yoshida did after, he talked a lot about refocusing the game on the multiplayer component of it. He kind of heard a lot of the critiques on Endwalker, and he wanted to kind of go towards showcasing and investing in better multiplayer content for us. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask is, at this point right now, I know that we have more coming with patches, but do you feel like we're getting closer to, because okay, sorry, I'll add context. I feel like the last expansion focused way too much on the people who play it for an RPG perspective and not the MMO perspective, when it should be both. And I play games to play with other people, and I felt like I was losing some of that. And I want to know how everybody feels, if we're kind of like getting back towards that really big communal aspect, that really big push towards playing with others, and being connected to other people in a different way. Because I think that that's the beauty of MMOs, and I felt like we kind of lost that a bit. So do you think that like we're getting towards that promise that Yoshida kind of outlined?
I mean, I think so. Just judging from like, well, judging from the content that they say is coming down the pipeline, we're getting a new field operation. It's like Bosja or Eureka. We're getting field operations, and from the art, it looks like other players are going to be involved. It's not just going to be us going out into a new. Maybe it'll be like a new diadem where you're like just going out with hordes of people to go and use a ether bazooka on something like it's to collect materials. Um, but like I know that criticism like for Endwalker, like obviously that's fair. Like it does feel like it was lacking, and especially when you look at the relic weapon, which is usually tied into like whatever the new activity is, and they're just like, go do whatever you want, kid. Here's $20, leave me alone. um, but like with the pandemic and with the story being that like, oh, you're kind of winding down as like this great world saving hero or like universe saving hero. It does kind of make sense that like the stuff would be you kind of like reflecting on stuff. So like
Mm-hmm.
Island Sanctuary makes sense to me in that context. But now that like we're in a new world and there's new adventures to be had, like, well, not new world but new continent. um I'm excited to like go and be with other people for these things, because if you go to like Bosja or like Eureka, I think is a better example, there's still people there, but like I want to see these places in their prime. And
Yeah.
so like when everyone's excited to be doing them, and like when a new map drops or whatever and everyone's like, "Oh, we're all going to do this together."
Yeah.
Um I am really excited for that. And then I'm assuming these alliance raids are going to be tougher, because you mentioned earlier that like the new alliance raids for Endwalker were like easy and people were skipping mechanics and stuff because they were killing stuff too fast. But like I hope that they do like tune these up a little more, where it is like, oh shoot, like half the alliance died because of one attack that we just forgot about. Um, and like even failing together is better to me than like
Yeah.
succeeding alone. So like,
yeah.
um, I'm hoping that it does kind of like come back to being like a group thing instead of you're just wandering off on your own to do stuff.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts of this game is I really love the story. I love the world. To a degree, like that is probably even more than what they're aiming for because I am one of the like people that are in the like lore hunting minds. Like, how does this one sentence
Hmm.
link back to this one thing from 10 years ago? Like, those are the types of things that I look for. And I don't think that that's the audience that the game needs to worry about. And like the hardcore rating stuff, I don't clear like all four savage to like floors like week one. The fastest I've ever done that is like 2 weeks. I haven't cleared like all the ultimates, even though I've like progged the first one a lot, or the second one, sorry. Um, that being said, I love when some of that content marries those things together. Like the trust system. I'm so glad that even though it did make Endwalker's multiplayer content suffer, I can make peace with the relic being kind of ass if it's good for the longevity of the game because it means that, the multiplayer content now gets the focus. So we can go back to something like they said Dragon Song had like a really long development cycle, and
Hmm.
I haven't cleared Dragon Song yet, but I have watched people clear it and seeing that ultimate fight weave in so many story elements as like a what if bad bad end scenario happened in Heavensward instead of ending how we knew it to happen. So instead of, this character dies, that character lives, and all of these things happen within the fight. It was kind of like whenever I did Ultimate Weapon, Ultimate, there was like a La Habrea transition when you get through all of these different fights and he starts talking and doing all of this like dialogue stuff. And I cried like in the middle of a fight because I was like, oh my God, this is so cool because this is like my favorite part. Like, these are some of my favorite parts of the story. Marrying those two things together rules. I also love that you can play it solo. But I do think, hopefully, with those things in place now, like Yoshida was saying, those systems are done. And now all they have to do is just kind of tweak those things
Yeah.
so they can be set up going forward. I think that's good for the health of the game. But I do hope that does mean that we get more content like Dragon Song, where
Yeah.
it's very hard. Like the ultimate is hard, but it weaves in so much of the story. And that's where I think kind of like Omega Ultimate even kind of was a letdown for me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let's go do Dragon Song Reprise after this.
Yeah.
Let's
Um,
go. Carry me though,
so
because I don't know.
I'm
Me
I'm in
neither.
the boat with Andrea here of like if I had to suffer through whatever Endwalker was, that now it pays off towards the end. But like we can now focus on multiplayer content. I could be semi okay because I still had to
Yeah.
suffer through that. Um, I fully embraced after being chastised for 2+ years of I had to love Endwalker. I did not like Endwalker. I think the patch notes were terrible. The relic it was awful, and it was very boring and slog, and why I quit for a year. I will gladly speak my truth on that. I'm
Agree.
accepting this, whatever. Anyways, point being, I'm also in the boat with Eddie of like I was more kind of okay with it because between the pandemic and then we had a closing saga, like I assumed we were going to get a lot less, and it was like okay, we'll eat a lot of this, but I was worrisome between um what we were getting towards the solo players. I still have not fully embraced the trust system. I don't know if I ever will. I've always been a MMO first player versus a
Hmm.
story player. I played a lot of MMOs. I've seen a lot of MMOs go from MMO to basically a solo player experience with people in it, and hasn't been as fun. And I've moved on. And it's been a weird balance of trying to not just understand, but be, kind of, I don't know if empathetic's the word, but just kind of like seeing both sides, like, hey,
Yeah.
let's get new base and let's get stuff. And so I'm like, okay, fine. I will say, kind of, since we are talking about some of the content, like, we're saying of like, the first trial we get to, or the second trial we do that is a solo duty was disappointing to do by yourself.
Yeah.
That I thought that was like the perfect like playing. We talked about all the stuff of like, oh, this we go to these things, we learn together with your friends, you have these moments together, you learn, you cooperate and everything else. And the way the story builds up for that of like you all come together and like, oh cool, I'm gonna beat this with my friends, and my friends are NPCs. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a necessarily bad experience. I know people like it, but it was one of those for what I enjoy of why I got into why I played FF11, why I played FF14. Felt like it was lost in some of that, and I feel like we have lost some of that in the last expansion or so. But as we said, he's talked about bringing it more, and everything else, and kind of like with Eddie, of like I didn't fully, we were kind of caught up with Baja, but a little behind in getting there, and then just everything else. So like I didn't get Eureka by that time, and so seeing that I was excited, and then seeing a relic dump was just very whatever. And so getting these, not even necessarily harder content per se, because I think the disconnect sometimes I get of like I think the extremes can be fun and want to do those and everything else, but at the end of the day, most of my content that I do is not extreme content. And if I have to do that by myself or do that, I might as well play another game at some point.
Yeah.
But saying all that, what he said and what we know is coming down the pipeline, and then kind of embracing some of what we've done with the story, I'm kind of excited to see where we are, and I'm still kind of holding out to see what we can do. It's just kind of been very tricky to see things because it has been like we talked about the problem of fail people, because I think of like a lot of the issues we talked about with trials, people trying the bare minimum, people not doing mitigation, people not doing this stuff, does at some point fall, whether we like it or not, on the story content of this game, in particular the MSQ, because it does not force you to do any of the other mechanical stuff or any of the other components of playing an MMO game. And I think even the trust system, as nice as it is, there is still some of that like difficulty and everything. I will say, if we're going to talk about the trust system, that'll get me to embrace it. Are we ever going to go back to my grand company and my poor little 8 people that are sitting there for years
No.
waiting
No
to
way.
do things?
Squadrons is dead, Matt. Let it go.
They redid the whole system. Why is that not up to date?
Look, let me, if I can recruit a Stinian, we can go back to the squadrons now.
No,
I know that was probably kind of ranty and did it. I know we kind of mix and match, and I'm trying to go with what we got because I do think the story content has been particular. This is an MMO with a good story,
Yeah.
and I feel like we have lost. At the end of the day, this is still an MMO.
Yeah.
And I like joining. And the biggest thing I've had with the trust complaints affair, which I'm willing to do, is that's cool, fine. You want to do some stuff with NPCs, or I don't have 5 friends, or do whatever, cool. But me and Kate can't run together, and so it's either all or none for us.
Yeah.
And so the fact that it's all or none means I need to have all.
Yeah.
And so with DPS queues being as long as they are right now, and people go, oh yeah, I just played the whole thing with trust. I'm like, awesome. Now I'm sitting in queue for another 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I
So
think
what-
that,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna mouth off. So what Matt is saying is that Kate should able to bring Estinian with y'all.
Which,
Yes.
you know, and that's what I said. To be fair, I thought, I mean, if we want to do more of that, of like
Yeah.
the flexibility, what we added with kind of those, I guess it's Criterion Dungeons, a little bit of the 2-man, 3-man type stuff. Like, yeah, that is fine. I think those content has been nice to see. Or I guess is it Variant or Criterion? I don't know what they call them exactly.
Criterion is the harder one.
The harder
Yeah.
one, but it's
Yeah.
still based off the variant or
Variants,
whatever,
yes.
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, okay. Anyways, I know they added that, which has kind of been a nice thing. I know we played a lot at the beginning, but then you have other stuff to do, and back to like I have to run my daily to get my
Yeah.
bonus stuff.
No, I mean, and I agree with Matt. Like, so this is the first time that I've ever thought to run a trust because of how the story has worked with making it very communal and getting to know the people around you. This is the first time I want to do that. I think it's really cool that they've expanded to trials as well. I also didn't think about it until I think you, Andrea, told me this. That, like, sometimes if you're worried about going into something because you don't know the mechanics, experimenting with the trust first and then going into something. I think that trusts, can be used as a bridge to get solo players into doing just regular content with more people because it can get them comfortable in a dungeon or in a trial. I think the big thing for me, and kind of to like what Matt was saying, is like if the trust system allowed for you to queue with 2 people and then have 2 others fill in, that would be a lot more because I play with him because this is like the game that we get to bond over and connect with. But that also means that, like, for a lot of our time here, like, a lot of the dips where we've left is because we could not find other people to play with. And I think that that's why I'm very excited for what's going to come next with Dawntrail. So this is the first time we have an active FC. This is the first time we're completely caught up. Like, this is the first time where I actually feel like I'm a part of something that is bigger than just, like, me playing a video game. Like, the number of hours that we've just spent playing with other people in our Discord chat, like, it just feels nice. And like that's why I've always played games. Like, I've always prioritized multiplayer gaming because I do see games as a way to like communicate and be with other people. And so I think we're getting there. I hope we're just like echoing what everybody says. I think that like the ramp is there for us to take. I just hope they take it. And I think that like there were building blocks to accommodate people who have to play alone or choose to play alone. I just hope it's used to kind of catapult towards something more, because I think the overall story of Dawntrail, which we're going to get into next, is about coming together. It is about understanding people, and it's about working together and getting that teamwork piece. And that's actually what I really appreciated from the game, and it's what I feel like I'm getting now that I have an FC that's like really cool and we get to play with. So like I just want more of that stuff, because I've never gotten that before, because I've never been in an MMO so long where I'm doing endgame content. I've never, Matt and I have always just done this by ourselves. And so now it's cool to have more people.
Kate, I just have to, before we go, we're going to keep doing before we goes forever. That is why I do love this game so much, because I love that I have friends, we'll call them like housing main friends, who they don't want to do Savage, but they have spent more time than I have in Savage, like making their houses beautiful. They have spent more time like reading into the characters and like doing, I don't know, just creating content around the characters and that part of the community that loves that stuff. Having an FC where people do all sorts of different things, whether they just be like crafter mains or they do everything because they're nuts, like all of that stuff I love so much. And hearing you talk about like those are the types of things you love being a part of, like what feels like a community, that is what I do really love about the game and why I do care so much about its health.
Which I guess, to be fair, like with that stuff in particular, and which I think Kate and I talked about this before, when it comes to multiplayer content and it comes to updating and doing stuff, I do think the FC of what we have for Final Fantasy 14 is a very lacking component of the game. I think they've not updated in a long time. I think you have, like you said, the talking and parts of everything, but the engagement of outside of us hanging out together feels lacking in some areas. Because I'm with you, like there's not always you need to be doing, you know, like the Savage or the dungeon parts of the game and components, but there is no like I guess you kind of had a little bit, like whether it be crafting together or just like different types of putting things together. I can think of other games where you built your free company house, or, you know, you built parts of working together as a free company for things you built together, or as a guild or whatever. And I do think like that it seems to be component. I don't think we're going to get any of that, but when it comes to like the terms of working together and having that, outside of like the you know, dungeon component, I feel like that is a very lacking part of what this game has, sadly. I think there's parts where you can bond over the housing and you do everything, but also there's you're still just buying your own house and talking with somebody. I don't need to be in game necessarily to do that, or I just can't even buy a house because the housing market is terrible. But I do wish we got some more like outsides where it is not like, oh, I need to learn 50 million mechanics and do the dungeon part. Like, oh, we can just work together as a common goal, whether it's a crafting, gathering, playing other things.
And I don't know if anybody's asked Yoshida about like expanding FC like things.
You know, I think I do have thoughts here on like FC content, because I do think part of the the 14 housing crisis, God, that feels weird to say.
It's real.
Yeah,
the healer strike isn't, but the housing crisis is.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that one. I think some of it is a mess because there are things that are locked to free companies.
Yeah.
And by
Absolutely.
things, I literally just mean the subs and the airships. And people level FCs, you know, as one person just to get those things and make more gil. And they did Diadem as FCs, and then they killed Diadem immediately because it was bad. It was really bad. But they do have, I forgot what they said it's going to, like the exploratory mission thing that they're going to have in one of the later patches. I'm hopeful for that'll be fun together as a group. But I get what y'all are saying. Like, I don't know what that looks like, I guess, because sometimes just like hanging out in the FC house and like G-posing and playing dead in the floor is fun to me.
No,
like,
it is. No, I don't disagree.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, but of course I want to do things like
at
that.
Some point you can only do that for so long. You're like, are we going to do anything?
Yeah. But that's I don't know how that is solved in a way that doesn't cause I guess other problem. Don't lock it to housing, I guess is the
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I said, there's various of things. Different MMOs have different things that we've seen, and there's plenty of different examples for what we do, and kind of experience, and everything else. So it will be interesting to see of how they go about this content and everything else.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
and to be honest, it's one of those. No, I'm not even gonna say that. We're not going with a hot take on that one. I'm good. Rolling out of here.
On that note,
I'll save it for the
we've-
next. I'm gonna save it for the next section. That way, people need to come
we've
back.
been going on for almost 2 hours now. So we're going to give ourselves a 5-minute break to grab some water, maybe use the RR real quick.
Called a bio break, Kate.
It's a bio break. And then we're going to come back and we're going to transition from talking about all the mechanics and all like the zones more broadly and really dive into the MSQ, our thoughts on the characters, our thoughts on the storylines. And I'm going to find out if other people cried like I did, because